Benjamin Netanyahu understands Looksmaxxing better than you. That sounds absurd at first, and yet he understands its essence better than almost anyone else. And if we can understand why, we may also understand one of the deepest forces shaping human history. One of the cultural roots of Looksmaxxing can be found in the film American Psycho. The film is a satire of New York's yuppie culture in the 1980s. And its main character, Patrick Bateman, has become something of an archetype in certain corners of the internet. But why? What exactly makes Patrick Bateman an ideal? His appearance, his face, his suits, his money? At first glance, those seem to be the right answers, and if we accept them, then Looksmaxxing becomes nothing more than the optimization of physical appearance. A project aimed at becoming more attractive. But that explanation is far too small for a phenomenon this large, because Looksmaxxing is not really driven by a desire for beauty. It is driven by something much older and much more universal. The desire to rise above the average, to stand out from the crowd, to be seen as more important, more valuable, more significant than those around you. But what does it actually mean to be above average? Does it mean having more money, being smarter, achieving more? Not exactly, because people do not become exceptional simply by possessing certain qualities. Exceptionality is not merely a personal trait, it is a social relationship, something that exists in the minds of other people, and that changes everything. Because at that point, the question is no longer who you are, the question becomes what other people see when they look at you. People rarely react to reality itself. More often, they react to what they perceive reality to be. In 1960, John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon faced each other in the first American presidential debate ever broadcast on television. The debate itself was not particularly extraordinary. Two politicians stood opposite one another, discussing the economy, foreign policy, and the future of the United States. What made the event historic was not what they said, it was how they were seen. And this was not simply a matter of appearance. Nixon looked tired, pale, and uncertain. The exhaustion showed on his face. Under the studio lights, he sweated visibly, and throughout the debate, he seemed as though he was constantly one step behind the moment. Kennedy, by contrast, appeared calm, confident, energetic. In other words, he dominated the screen. When people looked at him, they did not simply see a politician. They saw a leader. Someone who seemed in control, someone who appeared above the situation rather than trapped inside it, someone with higher status. And that is the important point, because status is not like money or a car. It is not something you simply possess, it is something you are granted. A king is not a king merely because he was born one. He is a king because millions of people are willing to treat him as one. But if status is really this important, then another question emerges. Does status exist only between individuals, or does the same phenomenon appear on a much larger scale, in corporations, nations, and even entire civilizations? Consider a simple example. A Rolex is not a status symbol because it tells time better than a cheaper watch. Nor is an Apple product valuable simply because it surpasses every competitor technologically. People are not merely buying an object, they are buying a story, a meaning. Status, then, does not reside in the object itself. It resides in the minds of those looking at it. And the same is true of nations. Most people do not analyze economic data. They do not compare industrial production figures. Yet they still develop an image of which countries are strong, weak, dangerous, or invincible. Take Russia as an example. The war has dragged on for years. Its economy remains under enormous pressure. The country faces countless challenges, and yet millions of people continue to believe that Russia has not revealed its true strength, that its real potential remains hidden, that if it ever committed its full power, its opponents would stand no chance. Whether that belief is true or false is beside the point. What matters is that the image exists, and that image often becomes more powerful than the facts themselves. Perhaps there is no better historical example than the Third Reich. At the beginning of the Second World War, millions viewed Germany as an unstoppable force, a power that simply could not be defeated. What is remarkable, however, is that this status did not disappear entirely with the war. 80 years later, Nazi Germany still occupies a place in the collective imagination. in films, in conspiracy theories. It is as if, over time, a second layer formed around the historical reality, the layer of myth. And this brings us to the final form of status, because the highest form of status is no longer respect or prestige, it is a myth. The moment when people stop focusing on what something actually is and begin focusing on what they believe it to be. And perhaps there is no politician alive today to whom more power is attributed than Benjamin Netanyahu. Across the internet, the same image appears again and again. Netanyahu as the man behind the curtain. Netanyahu as the hidden hand guiding events. Netanyahu as a politician whom many people believe wields greater influence in Washington than American leaders themselves. Whether these claims reflect reality is ultimately beside the point. What matters is that the image exists. It exists in the minds of millions. And the more people believe in it, the more power the image itself acquires. This is exactly how status works, and it is exactly how myth works. Because myths do not become powerful because they are true. They become powerful because enough people believe in them. And at this point, we arrive back where we started. Patrick Bateman, John F. Kennedy, the Rolex, and Benjamin Netanyahu. At first glance, they seem to have nothing in common. Yet, they are all manifestations of the same phenomenon. And perhaps that is why they understand the essence of Looksmaxxing better than most people. Because Looksmaxxing was never really about beauty. Beauty was only a tool. In the end, what matters is not who we are, but how we are perceived. And perhaps that is one of the strangest tragedies of human nature.